This series, the Tikva Through Text series, it's all about finding hope in the act of study. We need a little hope right now. It's a rough time in our world. And I'm really excited to welcome back Rabbi Leah Berkowitz. Rabbi Leah Berkowitz is a longtime friend of La Asok. She's taught several classes through our Beit Midrash and will be teaching again. Rabbi Berkowitz, I can't remember when you're teaching as part of the social justice series. Do you remember?
I'm teaching another Tikva Through Text on December 12th. And then I'm January 13th, I'm teaching as the social justice series.
Great. I'm glad you knew that.
I just sent out a notice. So yeah.
There you go. So I'm going to share my screen. I'd love to invite you to join me in the blessing for study, and then I'm going to turn things right over to Rabbi Leah Berkowitz. Join me, please, if you'd like. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed is the one whose mitzvot make our lives holy and who commands us to immerse ourselves, to engage ourselves in words of Torah. And speaking of being engaged, if you have thoughts, comments to share throughout this class, please, you can either put them in the chat or better yet, raise your hand electronically and either Rabbi Berkowitz or I will see you, and that way we can engage in conversation. And I'll just turn things right over to Rabbi Leah Berkowitz.
Well, hi, everybody. It's so good to see you. I'm happy to see Elkins Park represented and see some old friends. And also at this point, I now have old friends from La Asok, so I'm glad to see some familiar faces there too. So we are coming to the end of the Hebrew month of Tishrei, in which we have had 4 major Jewish holidays. And we're about to enter the Hebrew month of Cheshvan, which the rabbis used to call Mar Cheshvan or Bitter Cheshvan because it had no holidays in it at all. But if you're a Jewish professional, that's pretty sweet. So the other day, a colleague of mine started referring to it as Marvelous Cheshvan, and I'm going to start doing that as well. And I've also noticed that as a Jewish professional, Cheshvan is sweet because we can dive deeper into our Jewish learning, because we can get into a more regular routine post Chagim, and because we get to start the cycle of Torah portions all over again. So we get to sort of spiral up into a new layer of learning. And we celebrated last week this re-entry into the cycle of Torah portions on the last of Tishrei's holidays, which is Simchat Torah, literally rejoicing in the Torah. And the custom on this holiday is for us to read the last words of Devarim or Deuteronomy, and then immediately go back to the beginning and read the first words of Bereshit, pausing only for the Aliyah, the blessings over the Torah reading, which are an especially huge honor on this holiday. So a lot of synagogues in modern times have developed the custom of unrolling the entire Torah scroll so we can see what it looks like. And the first time I ever saw this done was at Brandeis University Hillel with Rabbi Alan Lehman. And he gave this absolutely wonderful drash where he basically went and did the highlights of the entire Torah portion. But he emphasized the final words of each book of the Torah. And he pointed out that each one speaks to where we are at that particular moment. So at the end of Genesis, we're in Mitzrayim or Egypt. At the end of Exodus, we're Bechol Ma'asehem on all of their journeys. So we're sort of in transit. At the end of Leviticus, we're at Bahar Sinai, Mount Sinai. At the end of Numbers, we're on Al Yarden Yericho at the Jordan near Jericho. And finally, the last word in the Torah is Yisrael. We have arrived at the promised land. So we have this whole journey going on in these last words of each book. So there are also people who make a drash on the first and last words or the first and last letters of the entire Torah scroll. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to take a look at what those passages are. Can everyone see that? Thumbs up? Excellent. All right. I'm using new technology. Okay. So our last verse, and we're doing them in this order because this is the order we read them on Simchat Torah. Never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Eternal singled out face to face for various signs and portents that the Eternal sent him to display in the land of Egypt, against Pharaoh and all his courtiers and his whole country, and for all the great might and awesome power that Moses displayed before all Israel. So this is our last word of the Torah. Oh, I'm getting a this is too small. 1 second. Let me see if I can fix that. Oh, nope, that didn't work. Let's see. I can make it bigger if I 1 second. Let me just.
People can also make it bigger on their own screen. You'd have to
Okay.
zoom in on a certain portion if
Wait,
the rabbi can't figure out how to.
Okay, I'm getting it. 1 second.
there we
It's
go.
just making me do it one bit at a time. Okay. All right. How's that? Better? Okay. Thank you for speaking up. Okay. So the last word in the Torah is Yisrael. And then the first word in the Torah, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. So we have when God began to create heaven and earth. I see somebody's holding it up. Oh, that's a beautiful piece of art right there. Or a lot of people are familiar with in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. So we have our last word is Yisrael. Our first word is Bereshit. Does anyone know if you put a lamed, which is this letter right here, and a vav, a vet. Oh my gosh, what is happening to my brain? And a vet next to each other, what word do you get? Yes, I see some people know. Cheryl knows. And Merle, yes. So when the word lev means heart, and heart has a particularly multifaceted meaning in Hebrew. Lev does, because in ancient Israel and in the ancient Near East in general, they didn't really know from brain. They didn't have a word for brain. They didn't think about it. So the word lev meant both heart and mind. They felt that the lev was the seat of both thinking and feeling. What interpretations, there are many, but like what interpretations might we draw from these first and last letters being heart and mind? Why might that be significant? Feel free to unmute or raise your hand or type in the chat. Bob.
Well, there's something in the V'ahavta is to follow his commandments with all your heart and all your whatever else is there.
Yes. All your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, or as they once translated at Creative Arts Academy, all your very muchness, which is their translation of me'odecha. Okay, other thoughts on, so it links us to the Ve'ahavta. Merle says Torah is the heart of Judaism. So yes, that's our lev. It's our heart and our mind in many ways, because it's also our wisdom, the wisdom of our people. Other thoughts, other drashes. Yeah, Cheryl.
Well, like you said, they didn't know from the brain, and so they thought that the heart was the soul of everything. That everything came from the heart was where everything centered.
Yeah.
And when you connect the end of the Torah to the beginning of the Torah, the card that I showed, this is a piece of my art here.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's colored pencil. That has the word Bereshit, which is the first word of the Torah, and
oh, it has both the first and the last. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, Bereshit and Kol Yisrael. So it's got the whole Torah in it.
Oh, I love that.
So thank you.
That's beautiful. And then it's got the heart in there. So we have,
Yeah.
so we also have some other comments. We have that Torah is the heart of Judaism. I also, from Cheryl's comment, sort of if the heart is our center, the Torah is our collective center and heart. Jody says our connection with Hashem. And Micah, Rabbi Streifer says, thinking about Rabbi Shai-Held's new book, which I have but have not yet opened because it is very big and intimidating. Judaism is about love. And Merle adds, the bait is an open letter leading into the rest of the scroll, which is actually another drash that I'm not including today, but I'm glad that Merle brought it in. Okay, so there's a drash made on the first and last words of the Torah as well. So our first and last words again are Yisrael and Bereshit. And next time I do this, Cheryl, you'll have to send me how I can get that piece of art, because then I can use that as a visual for this particular lesson. So here we have one of my favorite Midrashim, and it's actually from, I found it in an anthology of Midrashim. I cannot find the original source. So if Rabbi Streifer, if you know, you can tell me offline, because this was compiled at a certain point. I'm sure this is not where it originated. It's compiled in the 19th century. Okay. The word Bereshit, the first word in the Torah, meaning in the beginning, is an acronym for Bishishim Rabo Otiot She'Yisrael Yikablu Torah. With 600,000 letters, Israel received the Torah. The word Yisrael, the last word in the Torah, meaning the people of Israel, is an acronym for Yesh Shishim Rabo Otiot LeTorah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. This teaches us that each person has their own letter in the Torah. If one of them were missing from that 600,000, we would not have received the Torah. Because of this, if one letter is missing from a Sefer Torah, it is not fit for use. As it is written, the Torah of God is pure, reviving the soul. So let's take a moment to make sure we understand this. So what is your, I used to say to my high school students, translate that into plain English. Or if you have questions about the text. Yeah, Vicky.
I guess I have more of a question.
Okay.
If one letter is missing, the Torah then is not fit for use. But if it, but we're all a little bit broken, so
Yes.
it kind of bothers me. I mean, we're all a bit broken or something. Maybe, is that mine switching off to my?
No, that's mine did that. 1 second. Sorry.
Oh, so how do we, even that in our brokenness, I still want to be able to, read the Torah and receive the Torah and stuff like that. So how do I juxtapose that?
Right. That's a great question. So how do we receive the Torah and maintain the Torah in our brokenness?
Right.
There's the Dan Nichols song, I'm perfect the way I am and a little broken too. And
Right.
At the Creative Arts Academy, the URJ Creative Arts Academy, every time something breaks or a person gets injured, we'll usually say, it's perfect the way it is and a little broken too. So there is sort of an emphasis here on perfection that may be a little bit troubling if we read it that way. And we do take that very seriously with Torah scrolls, though in lots of communities I've lived in, we've worked with imperfect scrolls because that's what we had. But yeah, so if we're following this midrash, we might have some questions about what if a letter is damaged, what if a letter is broken, what if a letter is different than the other letters. Okay, David.
Yes, and there's a famous Leonard Cohen song as well. That
Yes.
the crack is what lets the light get in. the crack in the vessel.
Yes, I love that. Leonard Cohen is definitely one of the most Jewish musicians of the 20th century. Or textually, or text in a rich textual sense, as opposed to identity wise. Right. Okay. So the brokenness can be actually part of it. Yes, I believe his grandfather was a rabbi. That makes a lot of sense, especially if you listen to one of his last songs, which just sent chills up and down my spine when I listened to it. "You Want It Darker" is he also has his "Who by Fire," which is in a ton of Tokef, but this one is based on Hineni, this chant that's done on the High Holy Days that is "Here I Am." So yeah, he had a lot of Jewish textual knowledge. Okay, other thoughts on what we can take away from this? What? Oh, I'm sorry, Carol. Yes.
I'm having a little trouble with the sentence of each person has their own letter in the Torah.
Okay.
Where does that come from?
Well,
How
it comes
is that connected?
so
there are 600 letters in the Torah. Okay, got that.
okay.
I'm hung up on that line.
Well, and I actually am hung up on it too, and here's why. So they're matching the 600,000 letters in the Torah, which, by the way, is inaccurate. I posted down here an actual Torah scroll has approximately, well, actually not approximately, but some people have told me this number is wrong. But it's close to 304,805 letters. So it's actually a different number entirely. So this is all Midrash. The 600,000 comes from the count of Israelites that they believe to have left Egypt and stood at Sinai. The tricky thing is that I believe that if we look at the numbers, that probably only refers to the men. So is it 600,000 men and each of them have a letter? So this is another way in which the text needs some healing. You all are really sharp. That's a way that the text might need some healing, in that who is included in that 600,000, but that is where the number comes from, which is probably why they exaggerated how many letters there are in the Torah.
Thank you.
So Jody says every letter is important to make the whole Torah. So that's that is, I think, in some ways the essence of this text. And Vicky says we can strive for being better to repair ourselves in the world, being an imperfect letter in the Torah. So yes, so if we are at a moment where we're feeling imperfect, or we perceive ourselves as imperfect, rather than see that as, okay, so now that means that the whole scroll is not kosher, we're striving for something. We're striving to fulfill that letter in the Torah. Okay, Micah, and then I saw another hand up and then I lost it. Oh, Toby, yes.
This might go without saying, maybe this is what you're saying, but I saw this as being about inclusion within the community, that, just like a Torah scroll needs every letter, so does the community need everybody, even in our imperfections. And I understand that's sort of where the metaphor breaks down, right? Because if a Torah scroll, you have to fix the Torah scroll if one of the letters messed up, but in our community, we need everybody in their imperfections, in their wholeness, as the human beings that we are. And if we're not being inclusive, if we're excluding people from Jewish life in various ways, then we're not really kosher. The way that a Torah scroll is not really kosher if letters are missing from it.
Yes. And Bob, who has also pointed out that there's a possible different mathematical interpretation. Again, we're looking at a Midrash, so we're looking at something that the rabbis wrote to make a specific point. Their math is fuzzy. And so this is Torah math. Torah math or Midrash math. It's very different. But yes, and if you want to understand Aleph as a troop of 5 and that it's 3,000 total, then maybe there's a different Midrash you can make out of that. Vicky says this striving to be whole, or to fulfill our letter. Midrash math should be a future class. Yeah, I don't think I'll be teaching that one, but we do need all of us to be whole. So, and actually, so I'm going to build on your Josh of brokenness. If you look at Hebrew letters, they are not whole. They have breaks in them. They're all different shapes and sizes. So I actually really like where you're going with this, Vicky, because it's, an Aleph is, things pointing in different directions, and you know, the only thing that's like a perfect circle is a final mem or a samech. And that might mean that's a letter that's closed off. So, you know, when you have final letters and those are taller, and you have vowels, which I guess you don't have those in the scroll, but that's, I'm sure we could do a drash on vowels. So, so yes, so I like this idea of the letters are different. Yes, that is a progressive way of reading this text. Okay, so just to keep going, if we're going to look at, and we started to touch on it, if we're going to think of each person as a letter in the Torah, how might this impact, might that impact how we see ourselves, and how might that impact how we see other people? So Toby says, we all have value, as does every letter in the Torah. So how might we see ourselves? How might we see others? I like this also as a story of inclusion. In this book over here, maybe it happened this way. I like having all these behind me so I can point to them. There is a story about a person who uses a wheelchair, might be anachronistic, uses a wheelchair, and whether or not they will be able to stand at Sinai. And part of their conversation revolves around this idea of, if even one letter is missing, we won't be complete. And that includes this person and their abilities, and all the other people and their abilities and individuality. So Vicky says, we are each part of the whole. We are inclusive. Micah.
Yeah, sorry if I'm talking a lot, but this it brought up something for me. I just yesterday was having a conversation with someone that I'm working with on conversion who has certain physical disabilities, and was saying that, you know, on Yom Kippur this year, for example, I needed to eat, or on Simchat Torah, it was hard to stand and hold the Torah and dance. And so I was thinking about how Judaism needs to be, and we are making strides toward making Judaism more inclusive. But that ultimately, like, we need to be accepting people for who and what they are, for how we really are, right? Versus saying Judaism looks like this. We don't eat on Yom Kippur. Well, it turns out that that excludes a whole lot of people. And if we're thinking about people in their wholeness, then Judaism needs to look different than the typical, I think.
Yes, and I think that's been a really wonderful conversation that's happened. That's a really good example, because in the last few years, including in our newest High Holy Day Machzor, there are prayers that speak to the people who are not fasting on Yom Kippur and what their experience might be like. And I think that while I think most people know, oh, I don't have to fast, but have it acknowledged if I'm ill, or if there's some other reason. But but to see it represent, like, there's a difference between you're allowed and that your experience is represented in the prayer book. And I think that's progress. And I've been teaching Intro to Judaism, also working with conversion students, and they ask the question, you know, what if you have disordered eating? What is the rule there? And thankfully, there's a lot of really good articles about this. But I realized that if they hadn't asked that question, they would have gone around thinking, oh, I have to fast this day, even though it might set off another pattern of disordered eating. So it is really important for everybody to be able to see themselves and see themselves represented. And also also for some people, Micah says, eating on Yom Kippur makes it so that they can fully participate. Right. So I had a teacher, very Orthodox at Pardes in Jerusalem, who said basically her policy about fasting is, if that you would feel so yucky that you would have to go lie down, that defeats the purpose and you should eat. And I thought that was a really good gauge, because if you're not able to participate, then what's the point? Yeah, Cheryl.
So I'm someone who cannot stand for very long without intense pain. So I can speak from that angle. And so one way that I interpret this is looking at the word withstand. And so let's say
I'm
there's
sorry, looking at what word? I missed that.
withstand.
Withstand.
Withstand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's say there's an hour lecture and there's no chairs.
Mm,
So I can't stand for an hour lecture. I can't withstand that pain.
mhm.
But if someone brings me a chair
Yeah.
and they stand with me,
Yes.
I can withstand the lecture.
Yes, and I definitely have some strong words for anyone who's going to lecture for an hour in a room with no chairs. That's not okay.
Yeah, but it's just kind of an example of,
Yeah, no, I get that,
Yeah.
that being able to, you can't withstand it if you're not able to sit. Yes.
right.
So
So or maybe if they're standing room only and they found a chair for me.
yes,
Something
we
like
have
that.
people who need sharing that they need medication so they can't fast. Jody says acceptance of responsibility towards the whole community to be a part of rather as opposed to apart from. Okay, and I saw a note that somebody asked for more information on the disordered eating. I will send that to Rabbi Streifer and he can distribute it to you. Okay, so I want to wrap us up a little bit. As we arrived at, our biggest lesson is that each of us matters. What you say and do matters and has an impact. And I felt that this was especially important during this moment in history when we might feel overwhelmed or helpless, that we remember that we have our part to play in human history and in our people's sacred story, no matter how small. And then the other lesson that we can take away from this is that everyone has their purpose in the community. Just as we have our own part to play, so does everyone we encounter. And that might be especially difficult to keep in the front of our minds. And we talked about inclusion in terms of ability and disability. But it also might be difficult to keep this in the front of our minds when we're experiencing a lot of division and polarization. Who do we have room for in our words and stories? And whose letters do we have room for? Whose letters are we sort of pushing over to the edge? And my challenge for you today is to consider, what letter do you think you have to bring to the sacred story? And you can understand letter any way that you want, but I think this might be a good creative exercise. What letter do you have to bring to our sacred story? And what letters might you find in the people around you?
So let me say thanks to Rabbi Leah Berkowitz for this really uplifting and inclusive discussion. I think, the ways that we find tikva, we find hope, not only in text, but also in action, right? And the ways that we include, the ways that we ensure that others are included in Jewish life and in Jewish community. Next week, we're going to be studying with Rabbi Allison Van. We're looking at the Hashkivenu prayer, a prayer from the Friday night service, and where can we find hope in the words of the Hashkivenu. So thank you, everybody, for being with us this week. I wish you a good week. Go out and vote if you are in the U.S. It is a very important time to be doing so. Take care, everyone.